one goal, creating racial equality. Nelson Mandela and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. both changed the course of history. As the world keeps close watch on the declining health of the 94-year-old South African icon, many are taking a closer look at the impact of Mandela's legacy. Just today, President Obama called Mandela one of his heroes as he met with members of Mandela's family. Joining us now, someone who has ties to Dr. King and who's been a keen admirer of Mandela, Dr. Alveda King, who is the niece of the civil rights legend. Welcome, great to have you here.
It's just wonderful to speak to you today.
You know, some may remember that Nelson Mandela came to Atlanta to a packed stadium of 50,000 who gave him a hero's welcome back in 1990, and he linked his people's struggle against racial discrimination to the civil rights movement in the United States. What impact did his visit have on the country at that time?
His visit to the country was certainly very uplifting. And then there was a more private visit to the Martin Luther King Center where my aunt, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and many members of my family met Mr. Mandela as well. He was a quiet, strong, and powerful force in our lives and, of course, in the world. So I actually met him, and I have a picture in my home. And in that picture there is Martin Luther King Jr. and even Malcolm X, and in the center, Nelson Mandela. And so even though Mr. Mandela is a younger man, say in 1962 when he was incarcerated, and then Martin Luther King Jr. led the March on Washington in '63, their methods may have been different, but they were certainly just liberators and freedom fighters. And it takes a lot of strength and courage and purpose and focus to do that. And I just admire Mr. Mandela so much.
Those are such wonderful memories. You know, there are many interesting parallels with both leaders who led movements that transformed their societies in the struggle against racial discrimination. Both men were inspired by Gandhi and recognized that ultimately nonviolence was the path to take to achieve their goals. Quite remarkable when you consider that Mandela's early days as head of the ANC, many wanted to wage a violent assault against his apartheid government.
And you know, actually, Gandhi and my uncle, Martin Luther King Jr., studied Thoreau, and that helped to shape some of their philosophies as well. And then Nelson Mandela, while he was incarcerated, had an opportunity to read many philosophies and study many viewpoints, certainly Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. being one of those. Of course, we know that Martin Luther King Jr.'s foundation was in Jesus Christ, and that shaped him and was able to help him to lead a nonviolent movement. But it's just so interesting that all of those parallels come together across the years, and the fight for freedom and liberty is just, it's such a sensitive battle. And I actually had an opportunity to go to South Africa and to hear how the people have been so encouraged by their hero. And he has become certainly an icon and a world hero. And I believe that we should remember him always in that manner. And even now at 94 years old, and struggling and fighting for his life, you can see that strength and that courage. It has been part of his legacy and message throughout his life.
You know,
and of course, we're praying for him.
Of course. And you know, both men stressed the importance of getting opposing sides to talk to each other. That was really what set them both apart from other leaders.
This is so true, and that is the diplomatic characteristic also of a leader of that magnitude. Martin Luther King Jr., of course, sat at many tables with leaders with varying philosophies and attitudes, and Nelson Mandela has also always had that ability to bring us together, to cause us to coalesce and to think about a commonality, and that's so important.
Dr. King, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're praying for Nelson Mandela, as we all here, waiting to hear news for hopefully an improving condition. Thank you so very much for joining us with your reflections today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.